Hi, and welcome to a Small, Medium, at Large podcast. I'm your host, Gail Heisen, bringing you intimate interviews beyond normal boundaries. I want to thank Richard and Nancy for posting and producing our show, and I want to thank all you listeners who have been supporting us by liking, sharing, subscribing, and commenting. So please keep those comments coming, and we look forward to having more wonderful shows for you in the rest of this year of 2025. So let me tell you something about our special guest here today. Sarah K. Grace used her innate psychic gifts while working as a paramedic in some of California's busiest 911 systems for 15 years. Able to see, hear, and feel energies beyond the normal senses since the age of 7, she used her abilities to help countless people through their worst moments. Sarah is now a best-selling author, sought-after speaker, and renowned intuitive healer who has appeared on Gaia TV, Hay House Radio, Coast to Coast, NPR, New Living Expo, and more. She bridges the mainstream and holistic worlds while teaching people how to heal their trauma and embrace their own intuitive gifts by providing powerful healing and step-by-step guidance that makes sense in everyday life. Sarah is specializing in medical intuition and psychic surgery, and she can help you pull your life out of the ditch no matter how severe your current situation is. She is the author of Journey into Grace, Real Life Stories of a Psychic Paramedic, and Holistic PTSD, Recovery for First Responders, Military and Their Families, and these can be found on her website, www.sarahgrac.com. Let's welcome Sarah here today. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Gail. Thank you so much for having me. Hello to everybody listening. And
Ugh, it's a joy to have you here. And I want to say that I finished your book yesterday, which I will have questions for after we start with my first initial question.
yeah,
This is the one I ask everyone because I find it's the one that interests me the most. So that's the one I always ask. What was your childhood like? And did anything during that time plant seeds for your future in paramedic work and energy healing? And at this present day, are you still in contact with any of your family?
beautiful question. And so I grew up in South Dakota on Standing Rock Reservation, pre-internet, in a town that's just 2,000 people. And why that's important is because there was no Googling, what is this? Why do I see dead people and things? And I didn't have access to any other outside information or support. My family structure, unfortunately, was very violent, dysfunctional, unstable. There was a lot of addiction and mental illness. And so I was navigating turbulent and violent day to day life. And at the age of 7, I woke up, and that began kind of my odyssey with having high sense perception or psychic abilities or intuitive abilities, however you want to label it. But I woke up, first thing for me was being able to see auric fields and colors around people. And it progressed over the series of weeks into months, feeling every other people's feelings, hearing their thoughts, knowing their intentions, progressing to seeing disease in their bodies, seeing if they're disassociated or using substances, and then going into eventually seeing uh, dead people. And so as a kid in the middle of nowhere before internet, who's trying to like survive my upbringing in the family, it was a lot to handle, right? And unfortunately, well, is it unfortunately or fortunately, it is what it is in terms of what the experience was, because I was able to grow and become who I am as a result. But when I finally said something about like why do I see this stuff, it was very conservative town and family. And so they did the hellfire and brimstone. Don't ever talk about this. We'll send you to a loony bin, which I think a lot of us in that time period experienced. It's a lot more open-minded culturally now, thank goodness. But I internalized a deep sense of toxic shame at age 7 as a result of that, because I just remember thinking, like, what's wrong with me? I don't want to be like this. Like, I just want to be normal, right? And fit in just like anybody. And that really began a long 20 plus year odyssey of first really being closeted and trying everything to suppress the abilities, and then eventually doing my shadow work, doing my trauma integration healing for myself, opening to my abilities. To answer your question, am I still in contact? Most of my family is dead and deceased, so no, I don't. But I do go back to South Dakota every once in a while.
Did you ever do any research or anything finding out in connecting with relatives whether there were any stories or information you might have found out about past relatives who also had similar gifts or talents like these that maybe it was just hidden and never told to the other family members because they were also told don't tell anybody?
Mhm.
Did you have anything like
I
that?
I heard a bit about my mom being sensitive and then potentially grandmother being sensitive, but never discussed. So I wouldn't have an informed opinion on that.
I would say that there's probably a likelihood that there was some of that. And in reading with your book, it seems your mother was dealing with a lot of her own inner demons. And
Mhm.
I'm wondering if when she was having issues and problems, she was having visions and things and didn't know how to deal with any of it. And so was sort of put into a category of mental illness, because often that does happen. And then the persons get put on drugs and things for their what they the therapist considers a mental illness when really the person is having a spiritual experience,
Totally.
and they get all screwed up because they're not given that right support. So I
Absolutely.
understand from your book, you did find support. It just wasn't from an actual physical therapist or person in your home. What was the experience like to find that there were the other beings or spirit or soul, I'm not sure what word to call, that were able to support you through some of the horrific things that were going on during your childhood?
Well, the innate sense of, the stimulus, the energy is always just present for me. So I'm always aware of whether it's felt sensation or feeling or again, thoughts. So I can connect and have been able to connect to guides, angels, etc. For myself when I was down and out, because as a result of the violent upbringing, lack of stability, lack of safety, and then you throw on top all this high sense perception, I went off the rails for quite a while trying to cope, trying to have a sense of, safety and power, and really trying to make the stimulus go away. And we can talk more about that. But once I got myself grounded and integrated and became a paramedic, and the energies just started working through me on calls, I was able to help people in their worst moments over and over and over. So I was having a lived, tangible experience that was in direct contrast to what I had been told. And I was like, how could this be bad? This is like literally helping people in the worst of the worst situation. And so then I started opening to my own healing. I had to get over my own fear, my own skepticism, my own judgment. I had to unravel a lot of religious archetype and just kind of dogma that had been force fed as I had been force fed as a kid. And then I started to open in a lot of different ways to what is this and why is this, right?
That's I'm just saying that's was a very strong child that you were, to be able to do all that you did and face all that you did without having the support of family and others around you. So it's only a testament of what a strong being you are. And
Mm.
uh, uh, I my heart went out to you reading some of the crazinesses that you had to endure with your mother. And I understand some of that because I had similar types of experiences. But I have to say, it's still difficult to understand how the mother-daughter relationships could become this violent, or what happens. And I felt that you, and I have to say myself as well, approach those mothers and situations still with an open heart and kindness. And I loved reading in your book throughout that you said, I loved my mother.
Mhm.
And I really think it's an important thing to share because my mother wasn't my mother, actually, but I didn't know that. And I was the daughter of my father's affair. And so I was raised with a lot of, resentment and things being put at me that I never knew why. And I also came away with a very beautiful, healing, and loving relationship with this woman who physically and mentally abused me. And I think that that's a feather in both our caps here to be able to say to people, because when other people hear about these stories, or if they've had it happen to themselves, they can't find that place often of letting go and forgiveness to move on for the both people involved in that situation. And I think you were really a wise person to be able to note that this is my mother, these are the things she's going through. And even though it's not right what's happening to me, I still have love for her. And
Yeah,
I just thought that was a beautiful thing you expressed in your book.
yeah, I appreciate that. Strong and stubborn. A stubbornness in there. Yeah, the Midwest, it'll make you hardy for sure. I'm super grateful to be from there because yeah, definitely hardy people.
Yes, it makes us who we are today, these different experiences we have, and also gives us compassion and understanding for others when we see them in similar situations of pain. So, did this gift of yours always feel like a blessing and a curse?
More, it still does to this day, but initially it was more of a curse
Hmm.
because of the setup or the presentation that I was given with it. And then again, through the lived experience and being able to be there in these extreme moments, I was able to challenge and then to shift my thought and then do my healing work. And now I think it's pretty cool. Like what an honor. I was essentially a midwife into death in like 911 in the crises time. And what an honor to be able to be there with those people during those moments. And I started to really get that sense of like, that's when I started to see like there's more to this. This is an earned thing, first off, which is a big part of why I went through what I went through, being forged in the fire, being tested, that kind of thing, because having access to so much stimulus and energy comes with a lot of responsibility. And to me, integrity is very, very important with that. So leaning into like, wow, this can actually really help a lot of people, you know? And my mom died when I was 17, her diagnosis to death was short. It was only 6 months or so of cancer. And it was a violent, turbulent state, but I still wanted that mother-daughter connection. And when she just died, she was just gone. And I didn't have that. And I knew I never would. So I went off the rails, like I said, and I was coping with drugs and alcohol and promiscuity, and I was kind of all over the place. And what turned it for me was my near death experience when I overdosed. And essentially, I went into heightened state of consciousness, and I was like, "Oh, thank God, I'm out of there." And in the heightened awareness, unity consciousness, we have access to everything at once, and everything makes sense, right? And it was yummy and beautiful, and I felt love for the first time really in this life cycle. And then I heard a woman's voice, and she must have been a guide. She could have been my higher self, but it felt like I knew her, but I didn't know who. I couldn't pinpoint it. And she was like, "You're not done." And I was like, "Yeah, screw that, man. I'm over this. No way." And she was very eloquent, more so than I'll be now, but she was essentially like, "We get it's hard. You picked a doozy, but if you choose to go back, you're going to help a whole bunch of people that are like this, sensitive, energetically sensitive like you are." And so I was like, obviously, I made the choice to come back. And the funny thing, Gail, is I was thinking, because I was in unity consciousness where everything makes sense. So I was thinking that they guides were just going to like lay it out. This is what you do, right? To get there. No. Come back and you still got to do it. You still got to figure it out for yourself. And oh, I was so mad.
You wanted a handbook.
I did. I was like, do it for me. This has been hard enough already. But it was in that because when I came back, I had to go through a detox process and I had to really get clear. I had to be honest with myself about what I was doing. And, this is so common for where humanity is right now because people are just struggling, they're just maxed right now. And there's a lot of exhaustion, which I had, and a lot of sense of whether it's righteousness or kind of like, well, it's been hard for me, so I deserve somebody to come help me or do it for me. So I was kind of afflicted with that at that time, and I was just mad at the world back then. And it was justified. Like you could have looked at my life and totally understood why I was where I was,
Not
right?
only that, but I saw that you held inside all of this trauma as a young child without going for letting it out to your father or to any other person. And I thought that in itself was an incredible thing to be able to keep that inside you. So that has to be pent up and needing of release.
Oh, so much so, so just like it's so common for humans, we cope. Most of us try to anesthetize ourselves in some way, whether it's drugs or alcohol, but scrolling, right? Overworking, keeping ourselves too busy, right? And we're all up to something, trying to like just get by because it's a very intense experience for a lot of us. And if we have that unresolved trauma, which most everybody has something in there, then
Hmm.
the invitation is to lean into that, right? So I had to get over myself a little bit. And I remember it took me like 2 weeks of stomping around. I was so mad. I was so mad because I was like, hey, like I chose to come back here and I said I would do it, but like, and I had to get real again about what I was up to. But first I had to take responsibility for my life. And this was the game changer. If you guys don't take anything away from today, take this. That really, like, we've all been through different things. And a lot of times it's okay to feel like victimized because sometimes there is victimization in there. But ultimately, it's up to us. Like, what are we going to do with it? Right. And that's why I was stomping around. I was so mad. I was like, I see and hear and feel all of this all the time. And then I went through all of the violence I went through. And I was so mad about everything. But then I was like, well, it is what it is. Like, this is your reality. This is how you experience it. What are you going to do, Sarah? What are you going to do? And that really began my process of like, okay, well, I got to quit drinking, quit doing drugs, quit smoking, start exercising, start figuring out what I want to do. And that was way back when I was 20, 19, 20. And that really began, it righted the ship, so to speak, because I still had quite a bit of trauma integration through, I went through a lot of shamanism, shamanic practice. I've done a lot of plant medicine ceremonies. I've done a lot of Kundalini stuff and Tantra stuff to heal myself and to integrate that. But it all starts with willingness and accountability, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Uh, I uh, I think these journeys are different for everyone and very the same.
Yeah.
And the fact about sharing the stories of what each person goes through is so healing for others to hear because it gives them information about what they were going through and that they were not alone.
So,
That there's something about that, not meaning misery needs company, but more like compassion of understanding comes from people having had other experiences to understand what the pain another person goes through.
oh,
I my heart went out to you in reading your book, and at the same time, I loved the way you integrated your past and then the present doing scenes in paramedic work. So I love the way you did the book.
thank you.
I I wanted to ask about what does it feel like to be connected to angels and spirit guides that you've had since you're a child, and that the being so sensitive to your surroundings and people Uh, do you feel like you had to protect your sensitive side in these situations and not merge with the dying person? Because you're then presenting yourself, like for me, when I became I was going through massage school. Whenever I would massage the person, I'd end up leaving with their pain, and they'd feel great, and I'd have some terrible headache or neck pain or something else, and I didn't really know how to not do that. And
Exactly.
I was wondering if you could talk about what that's like after we could talk about how to help with that, but what's that like to be getting a call and you're on 24-hour workload and you're not giving rest and you're rushing to somebody and you're really present and there for them. And I'm thinking how grateful all those people that you dealt with for 15 years, how wonderful it was for them to have had you there, because most of the time I think they're dealing with people who are not in that space at all. They mean well, but they're not in that other place that you were bringing. So you were bringing an extra thing to that moment of death or saving their life. And I'm wondering how that felt for you in those moments, you know, approaching these crisis situations.
It was like a duck to water. So when I first started my paramedic career, I was still closeted. And I finally got into a societally accepted position. So I didn't want to be the weird girl who sees dead people around like the SWAT dudes, and the firefighters. So I was still very quiet about it. But over time, the more it happened, meaning being around death, or like I was the girl who was always there for like the worst of the worst, the most extreme crises, right? And what my experience was without trying is it would become very matrix like. Everything from the second we got the call, I would start receiving precognition data, right? Like of what was coming. And anytime death is near, still to this day, I taste metal. I don't know why, but I taste metal and it's my dead giveaway that we're going to death. And that kind of prepped me. But I would jump out and my boots would hit the ground and it would be like everything would go silent and expand and slow down and crystallize. And I would be able to see all sides of the call simultaneously. So what the fire captain's doing, what the police officer's doing, what the family members are doing, looking at the patient, what I have to do for the patient, so my physical body would be moving and talking, but my consciousness was expanded and looking at multiple tiers. And it felt like natural. It was like, yeah, of course, this is what we do, right? I mean, it was so uh divinely, I was just meant, it was meant to be. Okay. But sometimes energy would come over the top of me and it would literally, you could audibly hear it like boom, just drop the energy on scene so that we could actually work because sometimes it was so violent. Um, and as I continued over my time, I didn't say anything for many years, but people started feeling, my coworkers were like, what are you doing? First of all, why does everybody die around you? And second of all, because they all wanted to work with me because I always went on all the on the gnarly calls. But they're like, what are you doing? And I was like, I don't know. But I started to share with some of my closest partners that I would work with continuously. And it was in that time that I finally decided to get educated. And once I got educated, then I was like, oh man, like auric fields and like, claircognizance, clairvoyance, clairsentience, being like, and I started to kind of be able to understand how to run my system, right? So that I wouldn't take on people's stuff. And I my upbringing primed my system, my nervous system, plus my personality, because we as first responders, we're just a different breed. Like we run towards what everybody else runs away from. So there's something wired within us. And the intensity of my childhood primed me to be able to handle those massive, where most people just vapor lock or melt down. I just come alive, right? And so it was an interesting dance because it felt normal and it felt like I just knew what to do energetically. And then as I got educated more and more, it felt easier. Once I started my own private practice, Gail, like working with people, like with clients, and that was a whole coming to terms with process too. But um, I I really had to learn how not to take on, because being hands-on doing energy work, it's so easy, like you said, to just like absorb it all. And it would be easier for me to run like this mass shooting or whatever than it was to do like an energy healing session because it was just a different dynamic, so to speak. But eventually I got educated and now my energy system is not involved at all in working with people.
Uh, it's a great training and an education to be able to have.
Yeah.
I wonder, is there one or two stories you can share about any deaths that you witnessed that changed your life or left you with powerful learning or wisdom, or any deaths since you've seen, I believe, hundreds of deaths? Are there any one or two that you could share with us that was like a teaching for you as well?
Absolutely. One of my first ones, one of the very first times I saw death, where he was alive and he was having a angina, chest pain. And so we went to
Mhm.
the call and I remember his name was Rudy and I was brand new. I'm an EMT, right? And so I'm there to help the paramedic because EMTs are basic level and paramedics are advanced. I eventually obviously became the paramedic, but uh we're working the chest pain, the guy's talking, and we're driving to the hospital with the lights and the sirens. And this guy turns all the way around, like I was in the jump seat behind the gurney, and he turned all the way around and locked eyes with me and said, "I'm gonna die today, aren't I?" And it just scared the crap out of me because I was like brand new and I was like, like I didn't know how to respond to that. We got to the hospital. He threw a huge emboli and he was dead within 20 minutes. So he knew it was coming. That may have actually been my first like watching somebody die. And so that was massive to me, obviously, on a number of levels from the physical protocol standpoint. But just like, how do you navigate that? Like, how do I do this like between worlds thing? Like, oh, here they are talking to me in the body, and then they're not in the body, but I can see their soul. Like, it's a thing. They're like, what do you do with that? Right. And so I think that started the process for me of like, wow, can I handle this? Like, I don't know if I can, where do I put this, Because I was also a mom, my kids were young back then, and so there's other things in life. Another call.
You,
Oh, go ahead.
I was just wondering in that, do you ever feel like I've had this experience where I feel like it's not necessarily somebody in front of me, or they could be thousands of miles away, but they're getting ready to die, and somehow they contact me on a spiritual level or invisible level, and I feel like I do this assist or something, where like I sort of go with them to a certain point, and it's not something that I'm thinking consciously, oh yes, this person is ill, they die. It doesn't happen like that. It's just sort of, I could be in sleep or in dream, or I wake up and say, oh, this has just happened. Do you have that same kind of of an experience?
Oh yeah, very much so. Recently, well, not too recently, but there was the Paradise wildfire, which ripped through Northern California and incinerated, I think it was 86 people in an hour and a half. And I responded to that to do some chaplaincy work and some just like, everybody was needed because it was such a massive event. So I went up and it was so amazing to we went inside to where one of the trailer parks was in town, and everything was just torched, right? Gone. But there was probably like 10 souls because you got to understand they just got incinerated. It happened so fast, they're confused.
Right,
Right.
they're in shock. They're in
And so I showed up there on that scene and was able to kind of establish a light, if you will, just kind of an anchor point. Because and I did what I had done for all those years, which was triaging and talking to the spirit, like, hey, you just died, a fire went through, you were incinerated, you have the choice, here's where you can go. This is like, it's just like rapid fire talking to them, which is what I did for all those years, right? And it was amazing to watch them kind of floating there, being all confused. And then they'd look at the light and kind of go, and they start gravitating towards it. So that was an in person, but then whether it's astral plane, whether it's dreamscape, like lucid dreams, there's all of that is available for that type of thing as well.
That's, I'm just so happy to hear that you do that. So you were going to tell us, I interrupted like I always do. You were
That's
going to
okay.
tell us part two on that other question, the second story of a death that moved you when it was the first one. And then was there anyone where I always wonder, I'm thinking to myself, do you having see it's sort of like you're a catalog of death info. So I have all these death questions. What do you find on an average, say, from all the deaths you've seen, that more people are fighting to go to death? Or did you notice more people like the man that you just spoke about? He knew he was going to die. He was not fighting. He was like, oh, I'm going to die now. And he seemed more at ease with it. Do you find
Right.
that's more the case, or it's more the case of people fighting, or it's mostly half and half, or is what's out there?
Well, there's a difference between a medical death and a traumatic death. And I'm going to
Uh,
tell you that what the difference that I noticed energetically and from the soul perspective is. But first, we have to understand, Gail, most people are already dead. They still just have a heartbeat, right? So they're schlepping through life and they're like afraid of everything and they're just not living for whatever reason. So there's this tremendous disconnect. So my message right now to everybody is like, you guys, death is as normal as birth. There's nothing to fear. It's like taking off a heavy coat. We're absolutely, every single one of us is going to experience it at some point. But will you let yourself live? Will you let yourself have what you want, do what you want, go for your goals, let yourself be vulnerable? you know, and that's really my biggest message above all, because I think culturally we don't want to look at death, right? We glamorize the youthfulness and stuff. And really the egoic infrastructure of the mind of the human is, death is like the end of that. So it's like too much to think about. But again, just remember, nothing to fear in it. Okay. But live, please live. And now coming to a medical death versus a trauma death, I thought this was so like cool because I just started to notice because I was just in it so much.
yes.
A medical death, hospice, end stage disease process, whatever. So the person is laying in their bed or where on the couch or whatever. And we hear about this all the time, where in the days or weeks leading up to the actual death, so the heartbeat stops, and then they go through agonal respirations, which is like guppy breathing, and then they finally trail out, right? But we always hear of that person starting to see dead loved ones,
Yeah.
right? Or maybe they're
Instinct.
out traveling, right, to other places. Well, what's happening is the veil, quote, is thinning. Well, what does that mean? So here in the human infrastructure, we've got the senses, right? Say sight, sound, taste, touch, smell. We've got the ego, which gets a really bad rap in the spiritual community, but it's totally necessary for the human experience. We've got gravity and we've got duality. And these things make up our little human experience, which remember, like unity consciousness is always a thing. We're always 5D, right? Like this whole ascending to 5D thing. Cool. It's a great concept, but we're always that. We came here for this, to be human,
Mhm.
right? So as the person is dying, their auric field expands. And as it expands, that veil that keeps the senses intact loosens. So the energy that's always there, always around, starts to get through to their awareness. So they start talking to angels or guides or loved ones. And at the moments of death, it's so cool to see the chakras start at the coccyx, at the tailbone, and they unfurl like a ribbon, and it goes up the chakra system, up the Sushumna. Sometimes it's really fast, sometimes it's slower, but it was always so organized that I knew it was divine. I was like, this is coming from somewhere or something higher. Because regardless of the person, the disease, the gender, the weight, any of it, it was the exact same process in terms of the consciousness releasing from the body. And so consciousness released up, and it would typically shoot out the top of the head 9 times out of 10. Well, that's the light at the end of the tunnel experience, is the consciousness coming up out of the crown. And then
Mhm.
it would shoot out like, you know, those old Nerf water guns, like just shoot out the top of the head. And then I'd always see them floating at the ceiling, having a joyous family reunion up there with their pets and their family and everybody. And then they would disappear, right? So that's a medical death, is what I would experience. Different though in a trauma death, because you got to think about this. I can, and again, this is why I say, please live just to do it today, you know, because I cannot tell you how many people I responded on did not know that morning that they were going to die.
Right.
And they get up and they have their coffee and their Cheerios and they're driving to work and they get T-boned and that's it, right? And so with a trauma, you have to understand from the person's perspective, they're in their body and then they're not. It doesn't make sense. It's confusing. So I would come on scene and see the body crumpled in the car, or the body riddled with bullets on the sidewalk, or the body buried in rubble from a building collapse. And I would see their soul standing right next to it. And the
Mm.
soul looks just like the person, but I could see through them.
And
And
did you find that because when I've had that experience, they've always been younger than the actual body that was laying there dead.
sometimes I would see that, but a lot of times they just looked just like they did. And it was
Mhm.
like, because it was so acute and I was there to explain in the immediate moments following death. But yes, like in the heightened state, we're all around the age of 30 in like perfect health. Isn't that what they say, quote unquote? Like when the visions come and you see so you lose a loved one and you see them in a vision and they're all glowing and young.
Right. Yes. Right. That's right. In my experience, and youthful.
Totally. Yeah. So I realized that they could see me, and that's the mediumship thing. You know, we just seem to have this kind of beacon. And I just started over time explaining to them. Like I would start, you know, triaging and dealing with whatever we needed to do to the body. But I would tell the person telepathically, you know, you were just shot, you're dead, we're going to start CPR, I'm going to transport you to the trauma center, blah, 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 blah. And they would be watching. And most every time on a trauma call, when they were going to transition, an angel would come. And
Mhm.
this was one of the most incredible experiences to witness, because it's a consciousness. Like I never saw angels like with big wings or whatever. They just looked like a light being, and it was like a form
Mhm.
with an androgynous face.
Mhm.
8 foot to 12 foot tall, cobalt blue and silver, sometimes gold, but usually cobalt blue and silver. And it would start like little fireflies. And then it would form into this presence that just blanketed everything with this quiet calm. It's just like everything just went silent. And then the person who had died is looking at their body, but then they start looking at the angel like, what? What is this? You know? And over it could be a matter of moments, but I would watch them come together and embrace and then disappear. And at that time, I knew that the person had died, had transitioned. So that's the difference between a medical death and a trauma death.
And one other death question.
Girl.
I it's just one of that's one of my favorite topics. Um, the breath, the last breath. I've
Mhm.
always thought, and I'm wondering if you visually see that. I only visually saw it once, and I'm not. My experience is mostly auditory. I hear a lot of things, and I dream things, and I feel, but my visuals are not, I'm not a big visual. And I remembered saying, I can't understand. Everybody talks about they see this. What are they seeing? I want to see something. And after
Mhm.
I said that, I was holding my dog Charlie in my lap as he was dying. And he was dying natural death. He hadn't been put to sleep or anything. He was old. And as I'm holding him, he has his last breath, and I see the last breath. And when I look to the side, I have my first and one of my few rare visual experiences, and I see him as a younger dog meaning that he wasn't decrepit and old like he was then in dying. And he's running off alongside the house like a happy spirit, just rushing off. And I'm looking down and I'm holding the dead dog. And so I've often thought that is that last breath the one where the bit of consciousness, which I think lives on, because I think the body dies, but I think something else of us lives on. I'm not sure if it's conscious energy, or I'm not exactly sure what the word is, but that, do you think that comes out in that breath, in that last breath, or do you think anything about that last breath?
Well, it's really cardiac related, I think, because the limbic system, the reptilian brain, does this guppy breathing thing that can last for minutes after the soul has left in terms of human. And so with what you saw, it was perfect, right? I love him running away and being like, "Yay, I'm free." And sometimes, well, I
Up, you froze.
don't know if that's or something like it's pretty much always there's some sort of agonal like thing happening, but the consciousness has already left the building, so to speak. So it could be sometimes that it is tied into a last breath, and more oftentimes I would see it with the heartbeat kicking out, the
Mhm.
consciousness would leave, and then the body goes through what it goes through in terms of, right,
Releasing.
breaking down its last, because you have the nervous system energy that's going through the synapses, and like there's a whole, autonomic thing happening with us.
Well, I have lots more questions, but I did want to hear if there was any more on the second death that we didn't get to talk about because we had to sidetrack a little bit.
Well, it's good. I think it's good for people to hear, like, that's an interesting vantage point to have, like, around the trauma death versus medical death. And then again,
Yes.
always remembering that it's okay, you guys. One of the questions I'm asked a lot is, does it hurt? Does it hurt to die? I'm scared for it to hurt to die. And so it may hurt for the briefest of moments, but ultimately, no. Again, it's like taking off a heavy coat. So even if you're going through something scary or like something painful, it's acute, meaning it's just short. And
Mhm.
then you're never, ever alone when you die. I have never seen anybody not be greeted by family, by pets, by religious archetypes, or by like angelic presence. Never. And I have also never seen some dark thing come to like drag off the soul. Like I've never seen that either.
Drag them to
Lot of
hell.
I have seen a lot of dark things creeping and crawling on people that are alive. That's a whole other conversation. But so again, just remember nothing to fear, and what are we doing today? Now there's a little baby. I had a SIDS call that was a 3-week old. That was a big one for me because we got her to the hospital, and that call encouraged me to open to my abilities. And I also had a motorcycle down, and that was a trauma call, and that was hard for me because he didn't want to die, and he was clamoring. He was trying to grab to get back into his body all the way to the hospital with his little spirit hands, trying to climb back in there, which I knew it wasn't going to happen. So that was hard for me, and I had to process that one for a while. He followed me home. He wouldn't leave for a couple of weeks. I was like, "Brah, you're dead. Like, come on." So
And
this,
you were able to handle that okay when he followed you home. It didn't
yeah,
disturb you. You
yeah.
just knew that he needed your company for a little while before he could go on to his next.
He was just trying to get understanding because it's not
Mhm.
what he wanted. And so people hang out in the in between for different periods of time due to attachment or unresolved. Maybe they got some more karmic stuff to balance out or whatever. Or maybe it's choice. Maybe they're just stubborn. But ultimately, my understanding is that ultimately each soul has the invitation to transition to a higher frequency and integrate uh,
Yes.
at some point.
I my heart went out when I couldn't, because I had a very connective nightmare the night that 9/11 happened, and the night before, and the feeling of all these souls losing their life so instantly and traumatically, I felt like in my mind I was feeling like there was a cloud over there in that area of all these people that didn't know what happened to them. And all I kept thinking in my mind was, you've just had a traumatic experience and you're dead now. I know you don't understand it. And that's all I kept thinking was that all those souls needed to be told what happened. And so they could move on to the next thing. So it's wonderful that you were there to go to. I don't live that far from paradise. I'm in Northern California. And to know that someone like you was there to help those people when they were traumatically losing instantly, people dying. It's a beautiful thing, and they do have a name for it now. I've just heard recently, which I'd never heard of before, called the death doulas. And I don't know exactly how you become a death doula or what certificate you get or anything.
Yeah. I'm sure there's a program.
But I
Yeah.
would say that that would be, a place to fall into, the death doula. But assisting people during that time. And also, I want to say culturally, our culture puts all the people that are dying and ill in places, and then the family just maybe visits them. They don't keep them in the home here, where other cultures, like our Philippine family, they keep everybody at home. They take care of them. They want them to die there in the living room. They're not hiding them away. And all the children are there. Everybody's there. Nobody's being hidden from what's going on in the aging or the dying process. And I think that's wonderful. When I was in the Haida culture, Native Americans in Alaska and parts of Canada, these Indians, when I happened to be there and saw a death coming, and the death came, so I got invited to the funeral because I'd seen the death before it was coming, and it was unexpected. The person was happy-go-lucky that night, went to sleep, and they found him dead in the bed in the morning, and it was traumatic for the loss. These people were more my type of people with death. They cried, they yelled, they let out all the different deep, guttural, grieving, emotional feelings. They didn't shove it down in there and say, oh, we're supposed to look proper at this funeral. Everyone could wail and let out how they felt. When I was with the Huichol Indians in the mountains of Mexico, and I was there for two deaths, two different deaths. And I was involved a little with both these two children because I was trying to help feed them because they'd been so sick and starving. So I was physically bringing food to this little 6-year-old. And when this child died the next day, when I was on my way to bring him the food, and my friend's mother said, "Oh no, he's dead. He's not there anymore." I like
Wow.
went into emotional, like, how
Mhm.
could this be? And this poor little child, and la la la, and how I wished I could have helped him. And I watched how they handled the deaths of the baby that had been crying next to me all night, and all of a sudden it was silent, and I knew the baby had then just died on the other side of my wall. The child is buried. The other children, the brothers and the sisters and everybody, no one goes for the burial. It's only for like the shaman and the parents and the child, and everyone else stays back at the hut. Well, the next day after this was all over, and at that time everyone was solemn and emotional, but the next day everyone was totally happy and joyous. And I said, I don't understand. How can you lose a child and not be so? They said, because we know that that child is in a better place. We're happy for the child. And I really saw these, from our culture, that neither of those types of cultures is what goes on in our homes. And I was so grateful to be able to be amongst them during those times and be
Absolutely.
able to see that.
What a blessing. Yeah.
Uh,
In a different perspective, the more
yes.
innovative, more aware perspective, as far as I'm concerned.
Definitely a more enlightened or
Hmm.
closer to the thing. So, all right, so I'll get off death for a while now. I think I have some other questions here because let's see. Let's start. Okay, how you handle death, how they're going to die. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to move on to a little bit that's, about empathy and things like this. Oh, actually, I have one more couple. Actually, I have two more death questions. What am I saying? How do you feel personally about facing death? And do you ever have fear about this?
No, I look forward to. my time when that time comes. And until that time comes, I'm gonna live it full out. And just
Okay.
so no.
Which is the next question. I said, how has working around death made you more fully open to life?
Oh yeah, I just go for it, man. Like I'm gonna come in screeching in sideways with everything like smoking, and I'm just yeah. I'm really big into, living my bucket list and full immersion experiences in terms of, letting myself feel the feelings of the highs and the lows, and go to the places I want and burn the nice candles and use the nice plates and cutlery, and do it. Just do it.
Wonderful inspiration. I'm so tired of keeping that china up there in the cabinet.
Yeah, girl.
What is it there for?
This is what we're doing.
So it seems, oh, I was wondering if you could share some tips with our empathic, sensitive listeners
Yes.
on how to protect themselves from absorbing like a sponge the energies of others. And I also, after I went through your whole website, I will be signing up for your online course that does offer things about that. It looked very interesting to me, and
Beautiful.
I thought what your cost was ridiculously reasonable.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to check in and see what things I can learn for myself, because no matter all the things that I've gone through or experienced, there's always more things to keep learning from others, especially who's had similar things and experiences that can talk about it. So, can you share
Absolutely.
a little bit for our listeners?
Yes, absolutely. And this is what I'm up to now. So I did 15 years as a paramedic, and for the last 10 years, I've had a full-time medical, intuitive, and psychic surgery practice. And so I'm building Empath X, which is sensitivity is your superpower. And it's going to be all about understanding how to thrive as a sensitive. We are kind of taught that we have to be fragile, that we have to hide away, or, we can be too much or whatever. And that's just not true. We can actually be really badass, like being like this. And so this is what I'm up to now. So understand most of, well, first is going to be nervous system regulation, learning to ground yourself and regulate your nervous system. You can do that through breath. You can do that through being outside, getting in the sunshine to clear your auric field. Those are ways to regulate the nervous system, as well as magnesium and ashwagandha and nettle and great, supplements. So nervous system regulation is going to help you come down into your body. There's a lot of, oh, I got to ground and bubble and protect myself. Yeah, that's a good place to start. But ultimately, when you understand your power, you go from defensive to offensive. Like I live my life and I know my system so well and I know my energy so well that I can just fill my auric field with who I am, and anything that is not me just bounces off. Okay.
No,
There
that's
are other things, but that's kind of like, that's where we're getting to. Okay. But when you're starting, you're like, okay, that's great, Sarah, but what do I do to start? Okay, the whole system starts with nervous system. Most everybody's dehydrated, so drink some more water and get in the sunshine as much as you can, like at least 10 to 15 minutes. That really helps the physiology and the mitochondria and the ATP to regulate in the nervous system and the cells. So we want to address the physical. Now, earplugs are good. I always wear earplugs when going to a restaurant, to Costco, God forbid, right? Because I hear everything all the time. So there's swimmer's earwax or whatever kind. You just pop them in. Nobody can even tell. And it's going to help you stay in your body. Okay.
Mhm.
Another thing is, don't ever stand front body chakra to front body chakra. Like if you're talking to somebody, don't have your front open to them, because the transference happens so easily if you're an empath and you don't yet know how to regulate your system. So something super simple is you just turn your body to the side. They don't even know what you're doing. And they're just
Mhm.
talking, and they're just spewing all their shit, and it's just doing the thing, but it goes around your system. Okay.
Great.
So that's earplugs, nervous system regulation, turn the body to the side. Another one is going to just put your hands on your solar plexus when somebody's talking, and it acts as a physical deflector, because most of the stuff lodges in the physical, or I'm sorry, in the solar plexus. Okay. If they're super intense, hand on the heart chakra, hand on the solar plexus, turn the body to the side, and you're going to be, quote, protected in that moment. Then you get yourself away from the situation, take a couple of deep breaths. You can shake your body off to like Just drop it like it's hot and drop it like it's hot. And those are some in the moment, like, things that you can do to start becoming more empowered. But it is possible, Gail, like the way that I utilized my abilities on 911 calls, I'm able to do now just in life. I'm not always like full blown wide open. It's not as intense anymore if I'm like at the grocery store or whatever. But understanding that your giftedness is, like it truly is a gift, your sensitivity, and that you can actually be really, really powerful. It can actually help you. And we have to, it's our time as sensitives to lean in, to step up, to come out of the closet, to be like, yo, we're here. We're not weird. Nothing us, right? We're actually pretty badass. And when you understand, like, okay, so you see an entity, well, this is what you do. You see a dead person, well, this is what you do. You hear a voice, well, this is what you do. You feel everybody's stuff, well, this is what you do. That is possible. And that's what I teach now. That's what I work on now.
That's wonderful. I I was initiated in 2011 as a Mongolian Buryat shaman.
Mhm.
And one of the protections that we use, that we have, is a very large brass mirror. And you wear it right here around the heart. And then you may have some more hanging down. And the idea for that is to reflect, any negative things that might be coming at when you're doing your shamanic work. And for me, I found once I was initiated into shamanism and all the articles of clothing, it was a week preparation and a 6 hour, 7 hour ceremony. Those clothing and tools that we initiated in that I use when I do any sort of things in my home with someone that might come here, I feel that those things are also what are protecting me.
Oh yeah, girl.
The clothing, the fox, the different animal things. But not knowing that when I was much younger, I was always taking in, like I'd walk into a room, or like the worst one would be for me is going to a memorial or any kind of funeral thing where nobody's crying. And then I come in and I feel everybody's crying and I become this blithering, I might not have even known the person and I'm crying my heart out. And I
Yeah,
go, that's not me.
right. It's somebody else.
And they're all looking at, oh, why is she like that?
What I see most commonly, there's two, I mean, there's multiple physical presentations of what I called an undiagnosed empath. So the first presentation that's very common is going to be heavy, lethargic, sluggish, overweight, holding weight in the belly, GI issues, endocrine issues, quote, fibromyalgia. We've got those guys have a lot of emotional instability and kind of swinging all over the place. So understanding that that's when you're absorbing everybody's crap, it destabilizes your physiology, which destabilizes your auric field, right? And there's a lot of different ways to like kind of build it back and get back to powerful, right? The other one is going to be tired but wired, insomnia, like the overachievers who are always amped and they've got like tics and like, all those guys. That's the other kind of end of the spectrum in terms of what I see. So sometimes people are like, well, I don't know if I'm an empath, but they fall into what they're like, really? Like, yeah, welcome to the party, guys. But yeah, just understanding, and thank you for doing all that shamanic work. That is so beautiful and such a calling, such a gift to be able to do that work for people.
I I did not ask for it.
Oh, girl, I know.
And what was I going to say? And this very wonderful woman, Zagda, was visiting from Mongolia, and she said, I saw spirits all around you. This is what I have to do.
Mhm.
So I said, okay, because I'm like you. I'm willing to take any risks and do things that, and go to places. I've traveled alone to, really remote places by myself. And somehow I've always survived and came out whole. And very grateful for all the unusual things. The one thing that I've been sharing a lot on my shows that I keep wanting to express and I don't have an answer, but I keep putting it out there, is that I truly understand now that telepathy, which I'm very gifted with, it does not involve words.
No, not always.
Telepathy does not have to be with English.
Mm-mm.
And it was only when I was involved with Japanese people when I stayed at their home in Japan, when I was involved with the Huichol Indians in the mountains of Mexico, when I was involved with the Mongolian and my shamanic initiation, and there were no translators.
Right.
There's no translators, and we're having complete telepathic communication, but the shaman isn't saying in English in her mind, "Oh, Gail, go get this." She's saying it in Mongolian. In my mind, I'm thinking, "Oh, what does she want in English?" But somehow I know what she wants in Mongolian. So I don't, no one has given me an answer yet about the description of telepathy, that the fact is that we do not have to have the same language to, and I think people don't understand some of that also, which I thought you explained very well in your book, how you were telepathically speaking with these different individuals. It wasn't that you were out saying, "Oh, la la la," like this, out with your voice, but you were having a complete conversation, but it was all telepathic. So I've been doing that for a long time in English, so it seems, it seems comfortable and normal. But then when I realized I've been doing it in other languages, I'm wondering, what is it we're really doing?
Well, it's the heightened state of consciousness. It's the unity consciousness that we experience in that, whether it's a hypnagogic state or a near-death experience or a transcendental experience or, right? Because we go back to remembering our who, not who we truly are, because this is who we truly are too. But that is a different, it's just a higher vibrational plane of awareness where our consciousness exists for all of eternity. And it's like home. And it makes sense. So we when we're in the 5D and higher, everything makes sense at the same time. So language is just a piece of cake, like, of
Right.
course.
It's,
And so is, sacred geometry, numerology, algorithms, like things that would not make sense to a brain are just like, yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
good explanation. So I'm at my hour and I have about two or three more questions left, and I'm hoping that's still okay time for you. Are
Yeah,
you
let's rapid fire them.
okay? Um, it seems that more people are waking up to sensitivities, energy frequencies, and feeling more comfortable with the gifts they may have. Why do you think this shift has been happening now and that it's becoming more mainstream?
My understanding and is we are shifting out of the dark masculine, right, the Piscean, into the light feminine, age of Aquarian. So consciousness in and of itself is shifting. And we are living through a pivot point of that. Now, what I'm seeing is a lot of people meaning making around this and kind of making ourselves like special around this, like, oh, we're here to uplift humanity, which can be cool and it can be partially true. And at the same time, there's these 1,000 or 2,000 year overlays. Like none of this is new, you guys. All of this has been done before.
Mhm.
And humanity is coming on 5 times. And so we're just at one of those points of like, okay, so are we going to shift in consciousness and make the leap? Or are we just going to wipe out and hard eject and then restart again? And
Mhm.
that's kind of the big question that remains to be seen. So there is an overlay, shift in consciousness that's happening, but it's going to happen regardless. So a lot of people are coming in because we hold a higher vibrational awareness, right? So it's easier for the mass consciousness when there's more and more and more people holding higher awarenesses to shift. And at the same time, it's one of those things like, well, it's time for that to happen. It's normal, it's destined for that to happen. And yes, we can help it. Like we can be part of it in that way. I have just learned not to identify, like I just got my ass handed to me by spirit too many times when I kind of get big for my britches or be like, I'm special because of this. I just get knocked down like, no, girl, no. And so now I'm kind of like, okay, like I'm just here to serve, man. Like I'm just
Right.
gonna show up and do what I'm gonna do. So that's my answer for that.
A very good answer. Um, okay, so this is actually very short. If you wanted to tell us a little bit about what you're doing today and about the things you offer for our listeners to be able to contact you, such as Grace Place. And I had the last one was I didn't know what an empath X meant, and that would be
Yes.
the end of my questions.
Yay. So what I'm up to now is I work with clients one-on-one, and I have an online group, and I'm building an entire college that's going to be a show, that's going to be a whole thing around making sensitivity is your superpower. The thing that's unique with me is the paramedic. I apply the paramedic mindset to this stuff. We don't got to be all fancy with our words. To me, it's got to make sense and land in the everyday life. Otherwise, what are we doing?
Mhm.
So Empath X is coming soon, and it's being built now. And that is literally like a how-to protocol for like if you're just starting out, if you've been doing it a while, or if you're like samurai level. What are we doing and how do we do it? So stay tuned for that. If I work with clients from all over the world, and I am still very much an energetic paramedic. So people who have been to every doctor and specialist and got no answers, people who have been overcome like trauma addiction, people who are sensitive and trying to figure out their gifts, or all of the above, some version of all of the above. So psychic surgery is essentially like pressure washing and roto-rooting. It's far more intricate than that, but for the layperson to understand it, you feel like you lost 1,000 pounds. You feel like you get what is causing this? We go for that. I'm not interested in treating symptoms. I'm interested in getting down to the root and then helping the body and the system to acclimate. So I do medical intuition and psychic surgery. It's an overhaul for your entire system, a total reset, if you will. And then most importantly, I give you tools so that in like homework, so you know what to do, because you are your own greatest teacher and healer. You are the guru of your life. And we all need help sometimes, right? So a session is like literally a total overhaul, and then you get a bunch of answers, and then you get told, okay, now go do this for the next 6 months, right? So it's like pretty cool in that way. And we also have Grace Place, which is an online community for sensitive people. And same thing, I'm all about real. I'm not super into posturing as spiritual or whatever, right? It's real people that are sensitive, that are coming to terms with their gifts, that are dealing with life. And so it's a really great community. And you can find all of that at sarahkgrace.com.
That's wonderful. And I just wanted to understand again, was Empath X a course that's coming or a book that's coming? I didn't
Going to
understand.
be a book. It's going to be an online platform, and we're going to have 3 tiers. So tier 1 is kind of introductory. What is this? Why are we like this? What do we do in the moments of? Tier 2 is going to be more integrative and really activating each of the gifts, like seeing, hearing, feeling, all of the things. And 3 is mastery. What are we doing? How do we airbender this when we're out to dinner? Like, what are we doing when we're at the theater? How can we be really powerful energetically in our gifts? That's what it is. And then there'll be a show. I'm going to do a live call-in show where I get to just like on air live fire people with what we do energetically.
It's wonderful. And I have to say, you have such a very inspirational and energetic energy to be with this morning. So I feel like I can do a million things today now after we've had our podcast.
Go, girl. Well, thank you so much for having me on. This has been a pleasure, and thank you for all of the energy and light and consciousness you're bringing into the world.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure having you. I will be contacting you on your website, and I look forward to having you again. Maybe when X is launched, we can have another podcast.
Let's roll. Let's do it.
Okay, let's do that and keep doing all the wonderful, wonderful work you're doing. I just imagine when I was 7 and you were 7, I think I'm a lot older than you. Imagine if we would have had someone like you or I to be able to have those questions answered then.
Totally.
No, so whatever we're doing for the people that are young or older or whatever right now to help them on that journey, what a wonderful thing that is. So
Absolutely.
thank you
Awesome.
for being you and doing the work you're doing.
Appreciate it. Likewise.
Have a great week.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you so
everybody.
much. And listeners, I want to thank you for joining us today and have a very wonderful week. And remember, share your stories because stories can heal. Bye.